So, I ended up winning a university surplus auction of various old desktop CNCs, engravers, and a super old 3D printer. That was pretty cool. Except a slight wrinkle in that success was that the stuff was in Ohio, and I'm in Louisiana. It would have been too expensive to ship with UPS. This stuff's pretty heavy. So, pretty much what happened was the 14-hour drive was driven all the way there and yep, all the way back. I was pretty nervous about the condition of the machines and certainly whether or not the whole thing was even a viable endeavor in the first place. After getting the stuff back home and taking a look at it, I'm I'm starting to feel pretty good, pretty swell about it. So pretty much the list of these items are a EMCO Unimat PC lathe, a CubaPhi cube 3D printer, a custom made laser engraver, two old desktop engravers, 3040 CNC with a JY5300-2 controller with a hand wheel, and a 3040 CNC with a fourth axis and an MIB controller. So I'm going to take a look at the initial condition of these machines and see what work needs to be done on them, and eventually get these things cranking away. First up is the EMCO Unimat PC lathe. This thing is cool. It's a tiny desktop lathe with tiny stepper motors connected via tiny timing belts to the tiny manual controls. It came with two power supplies, so I'm guessing the seller had another one of these machines, or the original power supply died and they ordered a new one, which would mean that one of these doesn't work. I'll find that out the hard way. The gears, pulleys, and belts look like they're in pretty good condition. I would think that there would be some kind of dry rot on the rubber bits, some cracking or anything, but I'm not seeing any. The connector on the bottom of the power supply is pretty chintzy, which I just put a different connector on there. The motor works, and so does the speed control. Pretty cool. Very happy about this thing. I'm not even gonna bother looking for the controller and software for this thing. I'm just gonna find a modern open source solution, figure out what Linux CNC has with some stepper controls, and before all that, I'm gonna take it apart and clean everything nicely, make sure it's square and straight and slick and such, and then go from there. Next is the CubaPhi Cube 3D printer. At least that's what I think it's called. I couldn't find much info on it other than pretty terrible reviews. It seems to be all here. There's a roll of ABS filament, a sweet neon orange. The touch screen is pretty sweet. I've never encountered a tiny monochrome touch LCD before. It's pretty cool. I messed around with some calibration modes, and the moving parts seemed to work, and they reached their full range. There was a little bit of clickety-clackety when it hit the end of some of the axes, but I think that'll be cool. I found the original software, downloaded it, and tried to go through the import, heal, center, and build, and then export that model to a .cube file, but I could not get it to print anything. So what I'll do is get this thing polished up and probably bypass its OEM brains with something else, some other 3D printer control software, and go from there. This is a custom made laser engraver, I think. The exterior has no brand names or model numbers. There are pretty much no markings on the circuit boards, and that leads me to think that this was made based on a community kit. Some searching around the net showed some forums of people building similar looking laser engravers before, but I never found one that looks exactly like this. The plastic frame has a super sweet crack in it that I probably created during the movement process. But anyway, I just popped a pro clamp job on there for temporary. The display is really cool, and I think I janked up what used to be the touch feature. The interface has buttons that were probably meant to be touched via fingerings, and without being able to interact with the interface, I just leaved it be for now and will probably conjure up some new brains for this guy as well. From some quick Ask Jeevesing, I think I've found the origin of the two small mills. It looks like they were made by Minitech Machinery Corporation. Were called Mini Mill 2, are about 30 years old, and sold for about 4,000 doll hairs at the time. That's pretty good to hear and gives me confidence in the quality of the linear axes. I'll try to get an adapter for the parallel port and see if I can find some maybe Linux CNC or Arduino something that can send the right up downs to the thing and push the axes around. This is one of the two CNCs from the auction. It seems to be in pretty decent shape. It's driven by lead screws and has a pretty light duty spindle. Very light duty. What's really cool is that it was hooked up to a JY5300-2 controller with a hand wheel me likey. I've never used a hand wheel, but they're cool. Powering up and selecting each axis to control manually revealed that only the Y-axis moved properly. The X-axis spat and sputtered and even ran backwards if the wheel was being turned slowly, which makes it seem like there's some kind of binding happening, which is putting too much load on the motor and causing it to skip steps. The Z-axis didn't respond at all, so maybe there's some break in the wiring or something. This guy will benefit from a good old disassembly, rub and scrub, and reassembly and re-disassembly to fix whatever I broke during the first disassemblage, and that process will repeat until it's working. Finally, we have the other 3040, which is pretty dang sexy, at least to my unexperienced eyes. I don't know anything, really. Its axes are driven by ball screws, which are more robust and have less backlash than lead screws. It also sports a fourth axis for spin holding the whatever things I will certainly destroy trying to learn how to use the thing. The controller that came attached to this one has controls only for power on and off, spindle on and off, emergency stop, and spindle speed. I didn't bother even really doing much with that. I just popped the JY5300-2 on it so I could use that sweet hand wheel. I was even able to control the fourth axis because the controller had an output for it. On the controller it's labeled A. Maybe I should be calling it A axis? Again, I don't know. Each axis also has limit switches at their extents to prevent crashing into itself on the account of my stupidity. The Z-axis on this guy was also unresponsive, which changes my opinion over to the problem being the controller not outputting anything from that output. If the Z output can be quickly fixed, then this machine might be ready to be put into service, destroying whatever stuff I learn on. I'm pretty full excite about these tools, and I can't wait to get into the guts of each of them and maybe, possibly, be able to utilize them in a way that results in the possible production of a product-like thing, hopefully, one day, eventually, in some future.